As Election Day is less than a week away, I ask that everyone please help me to spread this message so that it may be spread as widely and quickly as possible, so that as many people as possible can hear it, and in one voice, we the people can truly demand and show politicians that there needs to be a change to the way politics is taking place in Washington. That it is time that we the people are thought of first and foremost, not Wall Street, big corporations, the elite 1%, or special interests who are buying the politicians who run our country. I truly believe that this is the only real chance for the people of this nation to truly have their voices heard and to really make a difference. As I have never done anything like this before and don't have the hundreds of millions of dollars in contributions, speechwriters, or a staff of many thousands, as the two primary candidates for president have, I ask that you please bear with me regarding this message, as the meaning and purpose is just as important to our nation's future. If you agree with what I have to say or have comments, you can let me know at Freedom Isn't Free on Facebook. I would try to do this as quickly as possible, but as we are talking about the survival of our nation, I hope and pray that you will take time to listen to all of this, even if you have to do it a bit at a time, as the upcoming election could very well determine whether the United States will succeed or fail as a nation, or will the greed and selfishness of the same population in our nation that led to much of our economic troubles be allowed to destroy what we have built over the past 240 years. In a nation of 325 million people that is just days from having to choose who will lead us over the next 4 years, it truly concerns me that there are still news agencies and citizens saying that they feel as though this election is a matter of having to pick between the lesser of two evils. Not in a time when we need a leader who is truly willing to work with everyone to create the solutions necessary to get our nation back on course for growth and prosperity. We need a leader who can convey to everyone that we all need each other, that people need money to spend to support businesses, so they need jobs, that when consumers buy and businesses sell their products, they grow, increasing the need for products, which are made by the manufacturers who get their materials and resources from producers, and so on. It's all one big continuous circle. However, when someone overlooks this, tries to take too much, or doesn't do things fairly, we end up in a situation just as we have been facing for more than 4 years now. I'd like to start by asking you to think about how many times you have said or thought, I wish things were different in Washington, or that Washington really isn't looking out for what's best for our nation. If you're like me, this has happened too many times. Next, let me ask you, how can things be different if we keep electing the same people or people like them to make the decisions that will influence what happens in each of our lives? Most people wouldn't argue with the statement that we currently have an ineffective and inept Congress that is leading our nation down a path of despair. That their selfish desire of not wanting to see the other party get credit for something that would actually make things better in our nation is more important than trying to fix what is broken. A prime example of this is the raising of the debt ceiling. Certain members of Congress stalled all attempts to resolve this matter in the months leading up to the nation reaching its debt threshold. The lack of action led to the credit rating of our nation being lowered. This has led investors to question the strength of the dollar and the uncertainty of the U.S.'s ability as the world's economic leader. In addition to this, in their efforts to try and get their way, they demanded that a bipartisan panel be brought together to determine where cuts would take place to pay for the increase that was being allowed. Once again, our elected members of Congress failed, and our nation is now faced with uncertainty of what the future holds as our government faces mandatory spending cuts to include more than $600 billion in defense spending. As most of us would agree, defense is by far the most important role of our government plays in our lives. But we also know that there is still a point where we need to say we are spending enough already, particularly with our uncertain economic future. To propose an increase in spending at this time certainly would lead me to question if there in fact are ulterior motives in doing something like this. In the wake of the attacks on the United States on September 11th, 2001, I was in awe as our nation came together, and there appeared to be a sense of patriotism that hasn't been seen since probably World War II. In that time, many people heard the call and joined our armed forces. People like Pat Tillman gave up what could have been very lucrative and fame-filled lives. Others gave as they could. But it seemed as though this coming together reached every corner of our nation, and once again it mattered not to be just another person, but to be an American. I strongly feel as though we must once again, that we must come together to tell our elected leaders in Washington that enough is enough. We will no longer tolerate you running our country into the ground while we work our hardest, sometimes working 2 and 3 jobs, just to try to provide basic necessities for our families. I'm bewildered that in a country where the latest census data shows 90% claim to be Christian, to the extent that others will go out to care only about themselves and what they can get and have no regard for anyone else. How the golden rule of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you doesn't seem to matter much to those who are driven only by greed, power, and corruption. Someone that seems to only take and not give anything in return. You can see it in something as simple as the way people drive all around our nation and in the way we treat one another. Each and every day, there are people in this nation who are kind, considerate, and caring for their fellow man. In other cases, there seems to be more who are the opposite. It reminds me of a story in the Bible about the widow and her last 2 mites, or the one where a rich man asks how he too can enter the kingdom of heaven. All this has got me to thinking about how truly wrong it would be for me to give my support to someone that I know isn't following a just path. As our nation prepares to enter a 5th year of high unemployment, an uncertain economic future, and a world that seems to be filled with people who convey pure hatred towards one another, I too am concerned about what the future holds for our nation. I chose now to do this, as all the debates are done. For all intents and purposes, the candidates have had more than ample time to say what they had to say. As of this morning, I've heard that nearly 10 million citizens have already placed their votes, and still it's anyone's guess what the outcome will be. In one corner, we have a president who took on a nation that was in tremendous turmoil and tried to do what he could to make changes that he felt were right. After 4 years, there are many people unsatisfied with the progress he has made in ending his plight, so they are thinking about making a change and looking to see if someone else can do better. His opponent is a person who spent his entire adult life thriving to satisfy his lust for power and money, no matter what the cost to anyone else. He has continually lied to the people of this nation time and again throughout his campaign. First, it was his investments were held in blind trust. Then it was, well, they will be if I'm elected. Then it was, I have no money hidden in tax sheltering nations. Then it was, well, there is some in the Caymans. This is probably one of the single most issues surrounding Mitt Romney that is bewildering me. Here's a man that has now admitted to evading taxes by putting money into hidden accounts in tax havens to avoid paying taxes, just as you and I have to, and some people want to make him the leader of our nation. I'm truly dumbfounded by this, as I would think that the people would be looking for the Attorney General to charge him with tax evasion, not rewarding his criminal behavior with the most responsible job in our nation. I would ask that the first thing one would look for in an elected official is to find someone that can be trusted to have my own interests in mind, not his own. In the heart of our financial turmoil, he said that our nation should let automakers go bankrupt jeopardizing the jobs of more than 1 million more Americans. This is the very same auto industry that provided the privileged life he led growing up, as his father was an executive in the auto industry. Many of the jobs were in the very same state where his father was governor, which helped to continue his life of privilege. To me, this shows that this is a man who doesn't know the meaning of loyalty, which is also very important to me, as I want someone in the office that will be loyal to me and not big business or the very privileged in our nation. He is so out of touch with things that everyday people go through that he claims that no one has ever died from lack of health care benefits. I guess that means he has never heard of someone dying because they couldn't afford the medicine they needed to get better. Finally, he jokes about liking to fire people. How anyone can joke about someone's livelihood is beyond me. Perhaps this is because of the fact that while he was CEO of Bain, they were able to turn a profit of nearly $2 billion for what turned out to be the end for just 5 companies that they bought, and unemployment for their more than 11,000 workers, and the end of their pensions. At one point, Bain almost drove Burger King into bankruptcy as they kept borrowing money and using the company as collateral to pay high profits to investors and to himself. As there are more than 12,400 Burger King restaurants, one can imagine the amount of people who would have been out of work had this reckless behavior continued. No one can honestly say they know where Mitt stands on any matter, as he continues to change what he has to say to fit the crowd he is speaking to, just so he can try to persuade those who are listening to him to vote for him. Over the past year, he has changed his position on so many times about so many topics that are important to setting our nation on a course that will lead to a stronger economy, the creation of jobs, to put a restraint on government spending, and to address our nation's burdening deficit, that nothing is clear about what he will do once elected. As for his ability to deal with foreign governments, during his trip overseas around the time of the Olympic Games, he not only insulted the people and government of Great Britain, he all but declared war on Iran in a speech in Israel. To further illustrate his ineptness in foreign affairs, Russian President Vladimir Putin thanked him just last month for referring to Russia as being the United States' #1 geopolitical foe. In this same segment, Putin called President Obama a very honest man who is quite sincere in his willingness to negotiate with Russia over the issues regarding the missile defense shield the United States wants to put in place in Europe. And he believes that Romney's aggressive stance vindicates Russia's refusal to compromise on missile defense. The U.S. has already spent billions of dollars to start putting pieces in place. Now it looks as if Russia will put up even more of a fight if Mitt is elected, jeopardizing the safety of the U.S. and its allies that are supposed to be protected by the shield when it is complete. This is exactly the reckless behavior we don't need from the person charged with the nuclear launch codes for our nation. In our nation, we have so many bright and intelligent people that know what needs to be done to turn things around in our economy, to create jobs necessary to put Americans back to work. Unfortunately, much of what they have to say and contribute will be lost to those who have bought this election. Through September, the presidential campaigns, including the top 3 super PACs for each candidate, have already spent more than $1.5 billion. By the time we reach November 6th, it is projected that the total spent will be somewhere around $2.5 billion, or $22.86 per second, or almost $10 for every voter they anticipate. What will we, the people, get for that? If you, like me, you know that very well that all those contributions weren't made with the good of the United States in mind. They were made so that the candidates would support legislation that would be beneficial to big business and the interests of those whose only goal in life is to have as much money and power as possible. They are many of the same people and businesses that led to the demise of our economy in 2008. As a person who served in our armed forces for more than 21 years, all this has brought me grave concern over the past year as I've seen things unfold. I have always been of the mindset that one seeks a person to do a job who will do what is necessary to succeed in the task required and not be concerned if it may make someone else look good. We need a person who puts the needs of the nation first, the needs of the people second, the needs of the party third, and finally their own needs. It's time that we as Americans tell Washington that it's time for a change to the way politics has been done in the past. That we as a unified nation will no longer tolerate elected officials who are out for their own personal gain or that of those who fill their campaign coffers. For this reason, I can't get in good conscience vote for either candidate that are on the ballot for president. Fortunately, every state in the United States offers the voters another opportunity to write in a candidate if they aren't satisfied with who is listed on their election ballot. I myself will be writing in my own name and ask that anyone who isn't truly satisfied, anyone who doesn't truly believe that either candidate will look out for the best interests of our nation, or if you are ready to send a message to our elected leaders that things need to change, to do the same. It is only if we come together as one nation without the influence of those who have paid all this money to support the one candidate or the other for their own personal agenda that we will succeed. My name is Gregory William Brusewitz. I am one voice among the many who is tired of politicians playing games and destroying our nation out of their own personal greed and through the corruption we know takes place in the capitals around our nation. I hold a master's degree in counseling psychology and am in the last class to receive an MBA. In addition, if I choose to continue my education, I'm just 3 classes from receiving an additional master's in project management. Plus, I've completed all coursework and the comprehensive exams for a doctorate in educational psychology. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my dissertation approved. I feel that this was a result of not receiving the guidance and direction from my mentor that I should have and was promised by the school I was attending when I set out to achieve this goal. Perhaps one day I will complete my journey. With my education, military, and work experience, I feel that I have really garnered the skills necessary to succeed in this role. As someone who classifies himself as an independent, who really tries to look for the best person to fill a role and who will do the best job possible instead of playing party politics, I will look to this nation to find the best people possible to fill the roles of those who will help me to guide our nation. To put the best people together as a staff that will try and fix things as quickly as possible to lessen the strain on our nation is feeling each and every day. To find those who have our nation's interests in mind and not that of the army of lobbyists who seem to be running Washington and outnumber our Congress at a rate of 26-1. Those who are already serving in government will be asked to join if they are seen as the best person for a job, regardless of party affiliation. Those who aren't will be asked to consider serving our nation to help forge a path to a brighter tomorrow for our entire nation. To help give you an understanding of how I think and how I would approach matters, I provide the following. I believe in the right to bear arms to protect oneself and exercise that right whenever I leave my house, unless I'm going to a federal facility or my daughter's school. I don't believe in gay marriage, as I feel as a true Christian that the definition of marriage is between a man and a woman, as woman was created from man to be his mate by God. I believe that adolescents have no understanding of how important education is to their future and the future of our nation. For this reason, I believe that everyone under the age of 20 should have to remain in school until they attain a high school diploma. If they seek to disenroll from the school they are attending, they must show proof that they have a plan and are taking action to complete its equivalency. To ensure that this happens, parents will be held accountable for ensuring that their children get the education that is needed. I don't believe in abortion, as it seems as though too many people are using it as a form of birth control. Yet, I do believe there are instances, such as rape, incest, or when a mother's life is in danger, where it is warranted. I believe our president needs to go to states where there are the most unemployed people to talk with the leaders to determine what it is that the people there have to offer employers and seek to find a way to match this with what is needed in the workplace. If necessary, to work with employers or educational institutions to try and create a means of getting those who are unemployed the skill sets necessary in today's business environment. I will look at different job creation plans that have been devised and work with our leaders for implementation of the best ideas. One example that can have a tremendous effect not only on creation of jobs but also for our environment is the creation of a national recycling plan. Something like this would create jobs almost everywhere and capitalize on our resources that are readily available to make the things we use each day. Businesses that use these materials can receive incentives for using these materials, plus have reduced cost of the materials that they need to make their products. Also, this would reduce the area used in landfills, which is becoming a greater burden on many municipalities and states throughout our nation as each day passes. I'm against the Keystone Pipeline, as it will only benefit big oil in Canada. Yes, it will provide some temporary jobs for the time it takes to build it, but then the U.S. must live with the environmental impact and any catastrophe if it was to break or leak, which is a real possibility, as the sand oil being transported through it is the most caustic there is. The U.S. isn't getting anything out of this. Once the oil is refined, it will go on a world market. This is the same world market that we already get oil from. The same market that has more oil available now than at any time in history. It just isn't worth it, the risk for no return. I believe that a thorough review of the Healthcare Reform Act and budget cuts that are being to begin in January need to be looked at thoroughly to try and find solutions to problems that will be created by them, and would ask for a 6-month moratorium on anything directed under them so the next administration can have a chance to resolve them and not disrupt our nation any more than it has already been by them. No one really wants to pay taxes, yet they are needed to keep our government running. In exchange, not only are we providing for our nation's defense and other functions, the government also has been able to finance things that wouldn't have been possible for businesses to finance. Perhaps the biggest of these in the past 30 years is the development of computers, the internet, and the technology that has led to the availability for almost everyone to have one in their home. Another is the satellites that are used and counted on every day by travelers around our nation for global positioning systems and the directions that are provided by our Garmins and TomToms, which the government doesn't charge for. Perhaps taxes could be more palatable if everyone would just pay their fair share. Instead, our Congress continues providing lucrative loopholes for big business and the ultra-rich of our society, leaving it up to those who aren't as fortunate and our national debt to make up the rest. Right now, there are several large corporations in our nation that are sheltering more than $1 trillion overseas to avoid having to pay their fair share of tax on them. If a Congress and President are elected to office that favor big business, it is quite possible that this will happen, and you or I will have to pay our share of taxes, and they will get this money into our nation tax-free. After almost a year, I still am having a tremendous problem trying to comprehend how General Electric, number one on the Fortune 500, who had revenues of more than $614 billion last year, paid no taxes. In fact, they got a $3 billion tax return. It's not the small business who are the problem. They are the very backbone of our nation's workforce. They are led by business owners who sit at their dining room tables and do their books, not the ones who have accounting companies looking for every means possible to reduce their taxes due. Yet our politicians keep saying that providing tax breaks to big business will lead to more jobs. Well, they've tried that trickle-down thing for almost 12 years now, and look where we are. Mitt Romney talks about the 47% who don't pay any taxes. Well, I'm sure if you asked, 99% of them would have no problem paying taxes if they made the income necessary under the tax code to have to pay taxes. As of right now, 1 of every 2 Americans is living in poverty or in the lowest social economics class. Of those living in poverty, 17% make less than $12,000 a year. Yet, I feel as though everyone should pay their fair share. So if I was elected, I would look to eliminate all tax cuts that can't be used by a majority of the American taxpayers. Anyone who isn't living in poverty will pay a proportionate amount towards the functioning of government. Those who have lower taxable incomes will pay less, and those who are making obscene amounts paying more. Taxes would be based on total compensation, not just the pay one receives. In this, everyone will have a stake in the functioning of our government. Another thing that has bewildered me is that Mitt Romney keeps bringing up how he hasn't paid less than 13% taxes for the past 10 years. He has stated that last year he even had to give more than he had to in order to reach the 13% threshold. Well, in looking at the tax tables for last year, I found that a person who had a taxable income of $50,000 paid 13.3%. Does this mean that he is trying to convince me that his taxable income last year was less than $50,000? I find this rather odd considering how much everyone has talked about investments only being taxed at 28%. Perhaps this is because he took a large sums of money he made, sent it to the Caymans, or perhaps to his IRA so it wouldn't be taxed. Clearly this shows that it's time for our tax code to be completely overhauled, so that everyone pays their fair share and deductions are reduced dramatically. Hopefully, this would allow for a simpler manner to file one's tax return, reduce the size of the IRS, and help to provide less disagreements in what some get and what some don't, and where most people can think that things are more fair. I still wonder, though, how, in the heart of the presidential campaign, Romney wasn't able to get his taxes completed by April 15th, just like everyone else, and he had to ask for an extension. Perhaps it was because it took that long to come up with a plan and a story that the people might believe and accept. Yes, it would be nice to receive a tax break with the money gained from eliminating tax holes, but I feel that it would truly be better in the long run for our nation and for the people to shore up Social Security by returning the money that was taken out, so that it was there for everyone when they retire, just as our government promised, and for the remaining monies to be used to lower our nation's debt. This would strengthen our economy as a whole. Besides, most people know that the tax break most would receive is a pittance compared to what the ultra-rich would probably receive. People keep trying to bring up that they are concerned about the government providing a redistribution of wealth in our nation. Well, if you haven't been able to look into the topic, I have learned that since 2008, net worth of those who make up the 90% has gone down almost 40%, while the top 3% have seen an increase of more than 50%. Of the ultra-rich, or the billionaires in our nation, their wealth has climbed to 16%. Some of these are the very people who gained from the demise of our nation's economy. Wages have become stagnant for most, and many have seen a decline to 1988 levels. In our nation, 1% of the population is in millionaires. However, in our Congress, 46%. Is this true representation? What truly upsets me a lot about all that has happened is that it seems no one has been held accountable for what Wall Street and the largest banks in our nation did. That no one is serving time in prison or being told to repay what they gained. However, the government did provide the Dodd-Frank Act 2 years ago. Now, as we are preparing to elect the people who will lead our nation, Wall Street is trying to get people elected who will help them to overcome its intent, to the point that they have spent more than $300 million trying to kill this legislation or to create loopholes so they can go back to the same risky behavior that led to our economic turmoil. Who loses out when this happens? It's not hedge funds or big business. It's your pension funds, mutual funds, university endowments, charities, and foundations. People that have entrusted their hard-earned money to those who are willing to risk it to make more money. All because they aren't satisfied with their 7-digit salaries and 6-digit bonuses. Mitt Romney has already come out and said that if elected, one of the first things he will do is to get this legislation repealed. All most people want in life is to be able to pay their bills, to put some money away for an emergency and retirement, and have something left over to do something, so it doesn't feel as though all they are doing is working to pay bills. For retirement, most are hoping for their Social Security and for their health benefits, as they have paid for these their entire working lives. To help the people of the United States out in their time of retirement, the government has allowed for individuals to put money away for this period through IRAs. In these, people can put untaxed money away for retirement and be taxed on it after they retire when they aren't making as much, lessening the tax burden on the average person. However, in another showing of their care for the rich, Congress never put a cap on IRAs, and many people are using IRAs to avoid paying taxes, saying they are putting it away for retirement. One of these is Mitt Romney. If you haven't heard, to date, he has more than $120 million invested in his IRA. It's because of facts like these, that he has refused to release tax returns. While most of us would love to have our home paid for and a couple $1,000s a month to live on, people like Mitt Romney appear to be thinking that they need millions of dollars each month. It's time that Congress closed these loopholes and all others that are being abused by too many people to avoid paying their fair share. Having people who are able to avoid paying taxes because they can afford to have high-dollar accountants do their taxes so they can avoid paying their share isn't right. People like the CEO of McKesson Pharmaceuticals, who made a reported $160 million in 2010, or the CEO of Nabors Petroleum, who got a $100 million bonus when he left the organization. Or finally, one I learned of recently, that the CEO of Chevron, making $160 million in compensation last year. For the life of me, I can't understand how it is that anyone can honestly justify paying a person almost $50,000 an hour when the average annual income in our nation is about $45,000 a year. With that amount of money, a company could pay $50,000 a year to more than 2,000 employees. A fact that seems to be getting lost in business today are that investors own these companies, not the board of directors, who are providing these obscene compensation packages, as they know their favor will be returned when it comes time for their compensation package to be developed. I believe that investors in these companies should be allowed to have a say in the compensation packages proposed by executives after they have been developed. After all, it is the investors' money that these boards are giving away. If these obscene wages would be reduced, greater profit can be realized and higher dividends returned to investors who could invest them in the same or other corporations. According to the last annual report provided for Social Security Trust Fund, the fund will run out of money in 2032 or 20 years from now. As the problem is 20 years away, politicians feel as though it can be put off until later and addressed by the next guy. Well, if this is done, for a great majority of baby boomers and Generation X, it will be too late. They are already talking of reducing Social Security to 90%. Social Security has to be addressed now. Also, to avoid ruffling any feathers amongst their constituents, past members of Congress have failed to clearly define what is necessary to claim Social Security aside from age. Because of this, it has become a very lucrative business for lawyers in taking Social Security to court for disabled compensation. Congress needs to address this immediately in order to help preserve what is left in the fund. In all likelihood, there are many individuals who are receiving compensation that shouldn't be, as they could likely still be working. In addition, they must find a source of revenue to replace the monies taken by administrations since President Johnson made first withdrawal, a fact that was illegal. Social Security isn't a privilege. It is something that has been paid for, and our elected officials need to ensure it is available as promised. Our nation seems to be stuck at 8% unemployment, with CEOs in the Fortune 500 reporting no real upswing in hiring when asked by the press. One can only imagine how much worse it would be if GM and Chrysler were allowed to go bankrupt. I feel that one of the greatest contributing factors is the outsourcing of jobs. In creation of NAFTA, it was the hope of our government that by allowing Mexican and Canadian goods to be brought to the United States tax-free, it would help to make it less lucrative for citizens of those countries to come to the U.S. seeking employment. That business in those nations could expand their operation and export their products tax-free to the U.S. to be sold. Unfortunately, a lot of companies see this as an opportunity to take advantage of low-cost labor in Mexico, and many businesses started moving production there. How true is this? As of the last reporting period that I could find, Mexico is enjoying an unemployment rate of 3.4%, one of the lowest in the entire world. What makes this even worse is that after the U.S. government bailed out GM and they finally returned to making a profit, they announced a $1.2 billion expansion of production operations. Unfortunately for the U.S., it was in Mexico. Talk about a slap in the face after getting U.S. taxpayer money. What I find even more insulting is that the U.S. government still holds interest in GM, and they didn't do anything to stop this. I find it ironic that Volkswagen, Mercedes, Toyota, Nissan, who are auto industry leaders, are creating production operations here in the U.S. In addition, companies such as Hyundai and Honda are expanding their operations here. Another recent development is that Airbus has announced plans to build production facilities here in the U.S. Something seems wrong when the companies from other nations are bringing operations here, and the companies that began, thrived, and are headquartered here aren't. Our Congress needs to be concerned about the United States as a whole, and not the wealth of a few. If these companies choose to have their products made elsewhere and brought here to be sold, then they should be made to pay for the benefits needed for those who are unemployed. Greed is exactly what got our nation into this dilemma to begin with. It's time for our elected leaders to do their job and look out for what's best for their constituents and the nation overall. If elected officials are so worried about their jobs to the point that they need to sell themselves to the highest bidder, perhaps it's time for the people they represent to fire them and get someone in office who will look out for their interests. It's time for the members of our armed forces to come home. After 10 years of war, more than 5,000 lives lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, and more than 2,000 of those just coming from Afghanistan alone, it's time for us to look out for our own nation. We cannot and should not be expected to be the police for the entire world. Some say the United States continues to create more enemies because we are getting more involved with other nations' affairs and being seen as a bully to many people. It's time to stop the endless deployment of our troops and allow them the opportunity to return home to their families until they are really needed again. The strain on our service members is undoubtedly a primary factor on many of the subsequent problems we are seeing in our troops when they return. The people of this nation owe so much to those who have served in the past and those who continue to serve. We owe it to them to place them in harm's way only when it is necessary. It's the sacrifices of those who serve our nation, states, communities, who are willing to sacrifice their life if necessary, that has made this nation what it is. This brings me to another point that has truly upset me. While campaigning, I believe it was in Ohio, Mitt Romney was asked about any of his sons serving our nation. His response, "They are serving this nation by trying to get me elected." This from the person who wants to serve as the leader of our armed forces, to lead those who truly do serve this nation each and every day, to lead those who know the words duty, honor, country, or God, country, core to be more than just words. It is a code they live by and commit their lives to a life where characteristics such as discipline, commitment, selfless service, loyalty, and sacrifice are instilled and demanded upon them each and every day. I ask you, how can we possibly expect anything less from the person we choose to lead them? Once again, this shows Mitt as a person that only looks out for himself, and that he has no regard for the needs or sacrifices of anyone else. His remark is a slap in the face to all those who have served so selflessly, and in too many cases paid the ultimate sacrifice. Our armed forces should only be called upon when our nation or one of our allies is attacked, or the interests of our nation truly justifies it. One life lost for the wrong reason is entirely too much of a price, and it is everyday people who pay it, not those who seem to be making or influencing the decisions being made. In addition to looking out for fairness in our tax code, it is essential that the next president take a hard look at the size of the federal workforce and the revenue spent to support it. In addition to the revenue brought in over the past 20 years, our nation has gone from a net national debt of $4 trillion to $16 trillion. In my eyes, the greatest contributing factor to this is the lack of having an approved budget for our federal government. Most states have it written in their constitution when a budget needs to be approved. Our federal government needs to do the same. The petty party bickering that has gone on over everything that is brought before Congress for too many years has got to stop. Our nation is getting nowhere, and the bills that are being passed would likely be better written if they were created in a bipartisan manner, which would likely lead to them being more well received by the people of this nation. A primary example is the Health Care Reform Act. This is something that everyone knew that President Obama truly wanted. As the Democratic Party had control of both houses of Congress and the presidency, there was no way it wouldn't become a reality. Yet the Republican Party didn't want anything to do with developing it and making it a good piece of legislation that was well thought out and thoroughly reviewed. Instead, our politicians are acting like a bunch of spoiled kids on a playground that are saying it's my way, or I'm taking my ball and going home. For this reason, I would support creation of a constitutional amendment that directs when the federal budget must be complete by. In it, I would propose that if a budget isn't approved, no member of Congress who is at the end of their term will be allowed to register, raise funds for, or run for re-election until a budget is approved and signed off by the president. To assist in making this happen, I would also propose that this amendment provide the president with line item veto authority so that he or she can eliminate facets that they don't see as being in the interests of the nation. President Clinton was provided this authority, which was later said to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and we ended up with budget surpluses during his administration. I would also propose that the wages for members of Congress be tied to the average income of those working in America, without including the top 1% of wage earners. Currently, they are receiving almost 5 times the average wage of those working in our nation. In addition, they would have to justify any expenses they are submitting to be reimbursed for. If this was to occur, members of Congress will have a vested interest in our nation and may be more inclined to do their jobs. Hopefully, providing for a more functional Congress for our nation. In addition to everything else they receive, it is estimated that members of Congress receive an additional $85,000 a year in perks, which would also be looked at. At no point in our nation's history has the approval rating of Congress been so low. Last year, our nation paid more than $5 billion in wages alone to these elected officials, and look what we got. You can also look to play a role in this by not merely going straight down a ballot voting for a particular party. Take time to learn a little about who you are trusting with your future. In all likelihood, if they have been in office for 2 terms or more, they may be a part of the problem and not the solution. Finally, something that has got to be done to reduce the entitlement of those who are unemployed. Assistance should only be for a short period of time to help someone get through a rough period of unemployment. It shouldn't be a way of life. Yes, the high level of unemployment throughout our nation has increased this spending immensely, and the only way to solve it is for the government to work with business to create more jobs with salaries that would allow people to support themselves and their families. But those seeking work also need to understand that they need to do their part, that it may not be that the job they want or the one they are seeking is located in the town where they are. To find a job, you may have to relocate, to travel, or you may have to learn new skills. In the trucking industry alone, it is estimated that the economy will create more than 116,000 jobs a year over the next 5 years. This is something you might consider. Of course, there are many other topics that we as a nation need to address and get in order, as our nation truly is at a critical point in so many areas. What we need now is a leader who will look to get this done in a manner that will benefit the whole nation. I, for a fact, know that Mitt Romney isn't up to it and question how much would change if the president was to be given a second term. I think the government was wrong in the heart of the crisis to just extend unemployment benefits. We could have been using that money to keep people working and having something to show for it, just as President Hoover did following the Great Depression with the creation of the Hoover Dam. Rebuilding schools, government buildings would have put a wider array of employees back to work than just concentrating on roads and bridges. What I do know is me. I know that I was born and raised by a middle-class family. My father was a truck mechanic and taught his trade at a technical school, and my mother cooked for the public school system. They serve as my role model, and I respect and love them as they should be. I was born and raised in Wisconsin until 1 month after high school when I left for military service. In my military service, I always tried to give everything I had every day and to make those who I was responsible for or those who I was chosen to lead better people and better soldiers. I too was a victim of the 2008 economic crisis and became unemployed as a result of cuts in the workforce. Unlike those who are seeking this office, saying they can relate to you or that they have heard you, I truly can, as I have lived it. How can someone who has everything they need and more truly understand the impact this time has been for so many people? Physically, mentally, emotionally, when they are going through it day after day, week after week, month after month. How do they understand when a person is already struggling and their only car breaks down, or they have an unexpected emergency come up, such as an illness that requires money to go see a doctor, or perhaps the greatest problem, to get medicine that a doctor prescribes when the cost of prescription medicine is astronomical, in part to pay for overpaid executives. We live in a nation of the haves and have-nots, as shown by the growing disparity in what people have. We live in a nation where there appears to be laws for the rich and famous and laws for everyone else. When we see so many injustice almost every day in our judicial system. It's time that we begin to make a lot more things fair in our nation, as I really don't think that this is what our founding fathers were envisioning when they set out to form this nation. At a time when so many people are struggling just to try and survive, when multiple families have to live with each other, when more people are going hungry or without heat and other necessities in life, all so many people are just looking for is a glimmer of hope for the future. I vow that given the opportunity, I will do everything I can to be that glimmer. Once again, if you truly don't believe in either of the candidates on the ballot for president on November 6th to serve as our president for the next 4 years, or if you truly want to send a message to the Republican and Democratic parties that it is time we are demanding a change, I hope you will find some trust and belief in this message. I ask that you please pass this along, encourage others to take time to review it and do the same. Then I ask that on November 6th or whenever you vote, that you write in my name, Gregory William Brusewitz. Your future really does depend on it, and it truly is worth taking a little bit of extra time to do this. It's time for the people of this nation to say enough is enough. It's time for our government looks out for what's best for our nation and for we the people. Once again, I look forward to your comments at Freedom Isn't Free on Facebook. You can also see how to spell my name if you choose to write it in. Thank you, and God bless the USA.